Okay, so in our first session of CSS, we have basically taken a look at the CSS basics. Then we have talked about some of the color properties and different types of selectors that we have. And then we have seen the right hand side of your CSS variables. These are some of the types of the variables and measurements you can have. And then we have looked at the inheritance where some of the styles are inherited from your parent to child elements. And then we have talked about CSS specificity. Okay, and I showed you a little bit on cascading. So how the cascading basically works across multiple multiple style sheets. So we basically have the author style sheet, which is a website developer who develops a style sheet, and we have the user agent style sheet, and then we have one from the end user. So user agent is your browser. Okay, so as a user of the style sheet, I have showed you how to basically create your own style sheet and change some of your internet options on your control panel and update that particular style sheet. I have showed you a font and you understood the not important flag, which basically tells that particular style actually gains more precedence and will override your style from your author and your user agent. Okay, so it's always a best practice that the author who is coding the style sheet should let the user define his own style sheets. If you set the author sets that to not important, then the user would not be able to change it. Okay, so that's one of the best practices that we follow. So that way, if our user wanted to change it, we'll let the styles define in a loosely way so that user can override it based upon their requirements. Okay, and then I've talked a little bit about CSS reset. CSS reset basically disables all your browser styles that gets defaultly applied to your website. So if you wanted to start on a clean slate, you basically use your CSS reset. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about CSS and box model. So this is understanding box model is very important, and the properties that you have in your box, you will use them more often. Okay, so let's take a look at your CSS box model. We'll go to W3 schools. So we have a very good diagram that we can talk about. So each and every element inside your HTML is like a box. Okay, a box is going to have certain properties. Okay, you can set up a border for your box. Okay, and then you have the content that you define inside your box. Okay, and then you have your margin, which pushes your boxes away from each other. Okay, that's your margin property. Understood your margin? You can have spacing between your boxes because you have multiple HTML elements. Each element is a box. If you wanted to add spacing between boxes, you basically use your margin property to do it. Okay, and then border basically defines your border for your box. So if you want, you set your border to red, green, or whatever that border that you want, you can set it. And you can also set how thick the border you want. You can set, okay, border 2 pixel, solid black or solid blue or whatever that is. Okay, and your padding, it pushes your content inwards from your border. Okay, you can have spacing between your border and your content. You control that with your padding. Okay, so these margin and padding properties are, and all of these properties you have margin, border, and padding. They basically have margin top, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. The same way you have your border left, border top, border right, and border bottom. The same way for your padding, you have your padding top, padding bottom, padding left, and padding right. Okay, so to define your paddings, to define your spacing between your content and your border. Whereas your margin, if you wanted to have certain spacing from the box that is to the left of this box, you can set your margin left to so and so pixel. Like margin left is 10 pixel, so you have a 10 pixel space between the box that exists on your left hand side. Okay, likewise you can specify your margin top and margin bottom and so on. Okay, so this is what is called as CSS box model. This CSS box model is very important. Okay, because whenever you wanted to, because whenever you develop your websites, you need to adjust the spacing between your elements. Okay, you do that with these properties. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of your CSS box model. Let me see if I have one. Okay, I have an example. Let's see what that example actually does. It's your HTML. There's a space here. So let me get rid of that break tag. I don't need that. And then I have my styles. Alrighty, so this is a very good example. So let's go to your index.html. Let's load that onto the browser and see how it actually looks. So this is just a body which contains a UL and bunch of li, and each list item contains an anchor. So that basically displays your links. Let's zoom it up a little bit so you can see that well. Okay, so now we can see that. So we basically have these disks, and these are your anchor elements, right? So each one is a link. Now we are going to apply some styles to it so that we can create the box. Okay, so let's start from the beginning, or let's start from the bottom. So let's uncomment that. Let's stop up to here. Okay, so now you know what is this, right? It's a pseudo class. Okay, your browser adds this property, and whenever your browser adds this property and you wanted to apply that style rule to that element anchor. So when you click on that anchor, I want the color to be black. When I hover on the on the anchor, I want the text decoration to be underlined. Okay, and let's go one level up. Oh, what is going on? Control X. Control V. So this is your color property. Color sets the color of your font of your anchor. Text decoration is none. I'm saying like text by default it keeps your underline, but I don't want that. I'm going to disable it. So I'm saying text decoration is none. So that would remove your default underline. It would show only when you put your mouse on it. Okay. So you're not able to see that font because we have your color as white. So let's remove that as well for now. Okay, we'll add that later. Okay, if you see now, if I put my mouse on it, I can see those underlines, right? So that is good. Now let's go ahead and take a look at your other important styles here. Let's remove these two comments as well. That's how you comment it. You basically use /* and your */ to comment out your styles. It's very similar to your Java commenting. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. Okay, your UL. Okay, this is your simple selector. I want it to apply to the unordered list. Here we have your property list style type is none. So this will remove those disks that you're seeing on the left hand side. It will remove those. Okay, list style type equal to none. Here you can change it if you wanted to have something else like circle or something else. You can square or something. You can adjust it if you want. If you remember, I showed you that type equal to square and type equal to disk properties. You don't need that anymore because those are deprecated in HTML5. They are no longer there. Okay, so if you wanted to have such properties, you can control that with CSS because we don't need to have two separate functionalities implemented. So they removed those properties altogether. Okay, and I just have a width of my UL to be 250 pixel, so that's pretty simple. And I want the font weight to be bold because I wanted to display the bold text for all my list elements. And here I have my list element. I'm going to say the background color is blue. Now I'm going to add white here so that blue on white will look better. Okay, so background color would be blue. And if you see, I have your padding here, right? So as I said, we have multiple properties that we can apply for padding. Padding top, padding bottom, padding right, and padding left. So the way if you want, you can define them separately. I can say padding top. The same way I can do padding bottom. I can have 4 different properties. But instead of specifying that, what we can do is we can just say, so the way these are ordered, these are in your clockwise direction. So you have your padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. Okay, so that's how these values are. Okay, if you have the same value, you really don't have to specify all 4. You can just say padding is 10 pixel. Okay, that would be applied to all the properties. It's exactly the same thing with your margin as well. Margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. If you want only those specific properties, you can also do that. But since I want a 10 pixel padding for all of these margins, I just define the margin as 10 pixel. The same way for your border. If you see your border, the first property here tells you how much pixel border you want. Here I'm specifying that it's 2 pixel border that I want. I want it to be solid black. Or if you want a different color for your bottom border or top border, you can specify border top, border bottom, border left, and border right. So there are separate properties that you can define. Since I want a uniform border for all my 4 borders, I'm going to just go with the border property. So you understood all these properties here. Now let's take a look at how it actually looks. Okay, so that's how it actually looks. If you see, the color is white. When you hover on it, we are getting the underline. So we have a black border of 2 pixel. Okay, the background color is blue, and you have some spacing in between, right? So this is your margin, because each and everything here is a box, right? So you have your margin left, margin top, margin bottom, margin right, and margin bottom. Okay, so these are your different and then I have also set up my padding. Padding basically sets your padding from here, 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 and here. Okay, so there is one thing that we need to know when we are using your margin bottom and margin top. So what will happen is, since it needs to have it needs to leave, let's say it's 5 pixel for example. If it needs to leave 5 pixel on the margin bottom and 5 pixel on the margin top, so what it does is it does not leave 10 pixel, rather it combines those two 5 pixels and then leave a 5 pixel gap only. Okay, so it's kind of like it collapses your top and bottom when you have, like, in between elements. That's how it does it. So that's one other thing that we need to be aware of. Okay, so if you see each and element is a box, you can control your spacing between the boxes using your margin and other different properties of your box. Alrighty, so that's your CSS box model. So let's move on to the next. What is that? Sure. Here, because I want an anchor of, so I want this color white to be applied to all the anchors. So that's why we have defined that anchor. So if I want a different color for each anchor, so what I can do is, either I can define an ID here for the anchor, and then I can say that, for example, if I want a different color for this guy, I can say ID equal to like W3 for example, and then I can go to my styles.css and then I can say hash W3, and then I can control that color that I want. I want to say color, I want red. So that's how you do it. Then you can apply this color red if you want it to for two different anchors. You can change that to a class. Instead of using an ID selector, I would probably use a class selector. So that would be easy. All the properties of what? Inside the anchor? No. So that's actually a different thing. So in your regular CSS you cannot do it, but there are other pre-processing or CSS pre-processing frameworks like Sass and Less. They allow that. You can nest your rules inside. But whereas in your regular CSS, no, you cannot nest your rules inside. Alrighty, so let's move on. Okay, now let's talk about your CSS display, visibility, and hidden. So this is another one of the favorite interview question that a lot of people ask. So what is display and what is visibility? So let's take a look at that. So for your display property, you basically have three different properties that you can have. You have display inline, display block, display inline block, and your display none. So those are your four properties that you can have: inline block, and none. So from the names itself, it's very clear. So inline basically means it shows one next to each other. That's your inline. Block is it shows one below each other. Your inline block basically it will display one next to each other, but it will have block level properties. For example, we can control your top, border, top, bottom, left, right, margins and stuff. Okay, you can apply your block level properties for your inline elements. That's your inline block. And display none is the way you hide your element. Okay, it will not show on your browser. It's hidden. Okay, and then you have your visibility hidden. Your visibility hidden is also a property that hides the element, but it leaves a real estate on the browser which will tell the user that there is a hidden element. Okay, user can actually look at it and say, okay, there is something hidden in between. Okay, we can take a look at the difference between both. Okay, let's look at an example. I'm going to just save that. CSS display and visibility. So we basically have the same thing that we have in our earlier slide. We have 4 different anchors and multiple LIs inside a UL. Let's take a look at your styles file. Okay, pretty much everything is the same here. So other than this one that I added, this is your pseudo class where you select the third child of your UL. So I'm basically selecting my third LI inside my UL tag, and I wanted to set that to some of these properties that I want. Okay, let's go to the first. Let's take a look at your display properties, and we'll come back to your visibility properties here. Okay, let's take a look at your display inline. So that's the one that I wanted to take a look at. Let's run that. So you saw that red text there in our last slide that we changed it, right? So that's our red text. Okay, let's close that one. So this is your display inline. I'm going to open developer tools. So there is some space. It requires more space, I guess. If since the space is not enough, it's kind of like going down. But if you have enough space, it basically goes up. Let's close out one away for now. Okay, that's your display inline, right? You basically have items next to each other. So we can actually change the CSS right here. So let's go to developer tools. I'll let you show. This is one other cool feature of your developer tools. Come on. So here, this is your select an element in the page. You basically take this guy and put wherever you wanted to apply your style to which element. Let's say let's click on this guy. So it shows me an anchor. So this is an anchor tag, and the style that I wanted to apply is to the LI. I click on my LI. I know that you cannot see that well. So here what I can do is I can basically change my display property here. So here right now it's inline. I'm going to change that to block. So instead of changing it in your CSS file, you can directly change it here to see how it actually looks. If you see, that's how your block level elements look like. Okay, if you see, it basically displays one below each other. So if you see, it is also giving me an inline block option. Okay, let's go to that, define that inline block as well. Inline block. Okay, so it's actually displaying one below each other because it does not have space. So if you see, it's actually going up again. Okay, so let me show you another useful link between your inline versus inline block. So your inline block elements allows the elements to sit to their left and right. So that's one of the property of your inline block, and it also respects your top and bottom margins and padding. Okay, and it respects your height and width as well. If you set your height and width of your block, it will actually take these properties. But for your inline elements, even though you set your height and width, it will not have any change. For example, let's go here and change that. Let's add a width property to our block. I don't know how to zoom this developer tools. Okay, anyways, it's fine. So let's add a width property here. See, we can add new properties as well. We can say just width tab, and let's say the width I wanted to set is, let's say it's 150 pixel. Okay, if you see, it actually changed your inline block. Because it's inline block, it actually changed your 150 pixel width. It applied your 150 pixel width. Okay, if I change that to inline, if you see, your width property is not even taking effect, because for your inline elements your width property and is not applicable. Okay, so you can apply, if you, it basically, because your width and your padding top, padding bottom, all of these stuff, these are your block level properties. So for your inline elements you cannot apply those, but if you want to apply those, you can define it as an inline block and then you can apply your properties. Okay, and let me also show you your okay, let me refresh that so that it will load whatever we have in CSS. Okay, let me change that to block, and we can change it to display block. So it shows one below each other, and then here I'm going to say okay, display none for my third li. That's your n child selector. You can select, so if you wanted to select a particular child, you can do that. Okay, that's your display none property. So let's go to your browser and refresh it. You'll see that earlier we had 4 of them, now we have only 3 of them. Okay, it's gone. Now let's go ahead and change that to visibility hidden. Visibility hidden, and let's refresh that. You'll see there is a space in between. So by looking at it, a user can think, okay, there is something hidden here. So whereas if you are display none, it will not take that real estate on your browser. Okay, it will show as if such the element itself is not there. That's the difference between your display none and visibility hidden properties. Okay, so that's your display and your visibility properties of your CSS. Okay, display inline block and none, visibility hidden. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about fonts. So we have spoken a little bit about your font properties. So let's talk a little bit more about them. So when your CSS, when your browser loads your web page, it actually requests the font from your operating system. Okay, or your machine. In your CSS, you set your font family, right? Font family, you can set it to, let's say it's sans serif, serif, and Helvetica, for example. So if one of the font is not available, it will fall back on your next font. Okay, if second font is not available, it falls back on your third font family. If third is also not available, it just takes the OS default. Whatever is operating system default, it just takes it. Okay, if you wanted to take a look at what fonts are available on your operating system, as I said, you can open your WordPad or whatever that text editor that you have on your operating system. Okay, so here these are all your different fonts that are available. So we have Calibri, Arial, Lucida. So we have various fonts that are available. You should also see serif as well. So it will be under your MS serif, MS sans serif, IJKL M. There is MS sans serif and MS serif. And if you can see that well, MS sans serif and MS serif, the serif fonts. Okay, so that's how your fonts are basically selected. Okay, if you wanted to display some code or anything on your page, you can also use monospace font. Ideal, this is the monospace font that all your editors uses. your Eclipse and other stuff, they use your monospace font, because that's a font that we use to display your code. Okay, and if you want, you can use your cursive font, you can use your fantasy font, whichever the font that you want, you will basically use it. Okay, the default OS is a serif font, but we generally choose sans serif mostly. And as this is how you define your font family: Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif. So if Arial is available, it takes that. If it's not available, it takes your Helvetica, and if that is not available, it falls back on your sans serif. So there's a typo there. It's a CRIF. Okay, so Helvetica font is not available on your Windows operating system, but Arial is available on Windows. Helvetica is available on your Mac operating system. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the websites and see, like, what fonts they actually use. Okay, let's go to your google.com, right? It's one of your favorite website that we visit every day. Let's go to more tools, developer tools. Okay, so here is your font family, Arial, sans serif. That's the font family that Google uses. Okay, Arial, sans serif. So likewise, if you go to any other website, you will see multiple other stuff as well. For example, if you go to Yahoo, so you should see your font family here, sans serif. Okay, it went away for some reason. It's reloading it. So scroll it up. Generally, if your page is very heavy with data, sometimes this developer tools kind of like becomes a little unresponsive. Here it is, font 13 pixel / 1.3. That's your pixel size. Helvetica new. If you have spaces in between your styles, the font families, you enclose them inside your single quotes or your double quotes. And then here you have your Helvetica, Arial, sans serif. That's your font families that Yahoo actually uses. Okay, you choose whatever the font family that's applicable for your website. Okay, and as I said, in your font size, you basically can do your relative measurements using your ems, or you can use your pixels. If you use your ems, the user style sheet, the person who is using your browser, can actually change those and then choose whatever the ems accordingly. Okay, but if you use your pixels, it's a little difficult for him to change it. Okay, so these are some of your text properties that we can use. So when you have text on your browser, you wanted to control the how it's displayed. We can use your text align, we can use left, right, center, those properties. Text indentation, if you want, you can justify your text using your text indent property. You can vertical align your text. Text decoration that we have seen already. We can use your text decoration none, text decoration underline, all of that stuff that you can do with your text decoration property. Letter spacing. So letter spacing is, if you have a word, if you want spaces between letters of each word, you can use your letter spacing property. Word spacing, if you want spacing between your words, you can use your word spacing property. You have your text transform, if you wanted to convert that to uppercase, lowercase, you can use your text transform property. Line height basically defines the height of your line, how it should be displayed. The line height. These are some of the text properties that you can use to set it. So let's take a quick demo on some of these properties that are available. Fonts. So here is something I have on my web page. So I have a body tag which contains a background color. Okay, it's a hexadecimal color. And then here I commented out some of the styles here. Font family is sans serif, font family is monospace. And the content, I set a background color of different color. Padding 5 pixel. If you see text element, I want the text to be justified. And your font size, here if you see I have specified it in ems, relative measurements. Here we can define your letter spacing, word spacing, text decoration, text align. I want this text to be center aligned. This is your font. I want an italic font of 0.9 em serif font for my OL tag. If you want, this is your body, right, on the top. But if you want a different text for your any of the element, you can also do that. Okay, if you see, most of them are simple selectors, and this is your class selector, and this is your class selector. This is your copyright text. Font weight is bold. Font size is 0.9 ems. Go to your page.htm. You can see all of the text that I have here. Here I have a div which contains I have a header h1 div with a class of content which contains a bunch of your paragraphs here. If you see, this is your pre tag that we talked about. So whenever you wanted to display code or something, we can enclose that inside a pre tag or a code tag. There is a code tag as well that you can use. And this is your copyright text. So let's run this on the browser to see how it actually looks. Okay, so this is my website which contains a bunch of text here. Okay, so if you see, this is my code that I wanted to display, pre-formatted tag. Okay, so if you can actually, if you want, you can actually change your styles as well here. As I showed you earlier, you can go to your developer tools, you can modify your styles to see how they actually look. You can also do that. So let's add some word spacing and letter spacing for this particular header. So let's go to our CSS and remove those comments that we have here. But let's add a letter spacing first. Okay, I want the letters to be spaced by 2 ems. Okay, let's refresh that. Here if you see, there is a spacing of 2 ems between every letter. Right? That's your letter spacing for a word. I mean, generally we generally set it to pretty low. 2 ems is pretty big. It's not even readable at all. And let's say if I want to apply, let's comment out this letter spacing because we cannot read that well. Okay, here I have my word spacing. For my header, I want the words to be spaced by 2 ems. I want the text decoration to be underlined. I want the text align to be centered. So let's save it and take a look at how it is on your browser. If you see, it's text align, it's center aligned to your page, and there is a spacing between your words. Okay, and there is an underline as well. So those are your text properties that you can actually use. If you see, we have your OL, it's displaying an italic font. So that's where you can take a look at where your OL tag is. Here it is. Invoke the static get version info method. Start using the properties of the resulting object. Here it is. This is your italic font that you have. Okay, and your copyright here. It's a bolder text. So these are some of the text properties that we use very often. Okay, if you see, your background color of body is a different color and a background color of your content is a different color. So that's why we have 2 colors here. If you go and check your CSS, go to your styles page, here is your background color of your body and background color of your content. It's a different color. So this one is a darker color, this one is a little lighter color. Okay, so those are some of your text properties that you generally use most often. Okay, alrighty, let's move on. Okay, here this is one of the other important part of your CSS, your positioning. Positioning is very, very important. Okay, so So using your positioning, if you wanted to position an element at a place on the page, so you want something to be on the top or bottom or left, right, wherever you wanted to position it, you can use your positioning properties of your CSS to control the positioning of your elements. So we have different types of positioning. The default one is a static positioning. Even though you don't set your position attribute, so the default is static positioning, which it will display all your block level elements one below each other and your inline elements one next to each other. That's your default positioning, which is your static positioning. And then we have your absolute positioning, relative positioning, and fixed positioning. Your fixed positioning, I think you might have seen in your various websites where you scroll down, your header kind of like stays. Okay, it does not scroll with the page. So that's your fixed positioning. You want something to be fixed on your page, use your fixed positioning. Okay, even you scroll it, you'll see that particular button or a menu bar. Okay, it does not scroll with your with your browser. Okay, that's your fixed positioning. I'll show you an example. If I show you, you'll never forget that. And then we have absolute and relative positioning. Your relative positioning, basically you wanted, let's say for example, and if you think of like this is a page, let's say an element basically comes here. That's a default positioning based upon the flow of your document. And I wanted to position this element from its normal flow of the document wherever it occurs. I wanted to set some positioning properties, like I wanted to say from the normal position I want it to move from the top, I wanted it to move 10 pixel. From the left I wanted it to move another 20 pixel. Okay, you can basically control wherever it is in the normal flow of your document, you can control it. That's your relative positioning. Your absolute positioning, basically where you can position the element relative to the body of your document, body element of your document, you can relatively position it. You can take any element and you can place it anywhere on the page using your absolute positioning. Okay, so let me show you an example so that you guys understand that. You'll never forget that. Positioning. Alrighty, I have a page. So let's close out the other ones that I don't want. I feel for some reason a browser is a little slow. So here I have a bunch of buttons here. So these are the buttons that I'm going to play with. Okay, I have a scroll bar here as well so that I can show you the fixed positioning. So let's take one of the button and then set the positioning property on it. Okay, let's take your absolute positioning here. Buttons. So inside the buttons div, I have an input. I have multiple inputs. I wanted to apply this style to the last child of those inputs. Okay, that's your button 3. Okay, let's go back to your HTML to see that. Okay, I have a div id equal to buttons. I have 3 inputs. I wanted to apply the style to the third input. So you can use your last child pseudo class. That's what I have used here, last child pseudo class. Position is absolute. Top, from the top of your page, I wanted to have it 10 pixel. From the left, I want 50 pixel. So let's see how it actually displays. If you see, from the body of your document, your button actually moved from here and it went up to here. Okay, so you can set your top, left, right, bottom, whichever the properties that you want to position this button anywhere on your page. But if you scroll it up, you cannot see that button anymore because it's not a fixed button. Okay, it scrolls with your web page. Okay, now let's change that to fixed. Okay, now I have a fixed positioning button. My button displays there. Let's refresh that to make sure that the change is there. If you see your button, you can see the button, right? It's following your scroll bar. That's your fixed positioning of your CSS. That's your positioning property. We have your absolute positioning and your fixed positioning. Okay.
is there on the bottom of the browser that saying that if you want to go top on top, click here, kind of.
Yeah, something like that. For example, I think you must have seen this in Apple website as well. So when you scroll up in your Apple website, so there is a sidebar here. It does not scroll. It will stay there. That's because of fixed
Yeah.
positioning. Okay, now let's comment out this fixed positioning, and let's take a look at our this one right here, last trail position. Let's take a look at our relative positioning here. Okay, position relative, top is 10 pixel and left is 50 pixel. So let's save that. Okay, that's already took the effect. So here if you see the button, if I don't apply any positioning, it should generally it should appear the same way it's appearing. The button 2 is appearing right after button 1. So from its wherever it occurs in the normal position, if I don't apply any style, so from that position it moved from the top, from the so what were the properties that we applied? Left it moved, and from the top it moved 10 pixel. Okay, so from its normal position in the flow of your document, so wherever it occurs normally, so from there if you wanted to move your element, use your relative positioning. Okay, but if you, irrespective of where it occurs, you wanted to place this element somewhere on the page, use your absolute positioning. Okay, so that's the difference between your different position attributes. That's one of the popular interview question as well on CSS. What are the different position attributes and what each one of them does? Okay, understood your positioning properties? So there is floating of your elements as well. We have float left and float right, which you can use to float your elements if you want. So we'll take a look at that as well. Let's take a look at how to create column layouts with your float and absolute properties. So is anyone familiar with column layouts? So where you divide your page into multiple columns. So where you say if it's a 3-column layout, you have a sidebar, you have a body, and you have a right sidebar. That's your 3-column layout. So in a 2-column layout page, you have a sidebar and then you have your body. So that's your 2-column layout. So these are your popular layouts that you might have seen in various web pages. So let's take a look at how to do it using your CSS positioning and your float. Let's take a look at your 2-column one first. This is my page. Okay, so this is the same page that we have seen earlier. So here we are going to change something so that we can set our 2-column layout using your positioning property. So here I'm going to have this author as 1 column and rest of the content as a 2nd column. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, let's go ahead and modify our styles. So here the content is inside a div ID equal to content. Okay, and then we have another div which contains your author information. So we have 2 sections of the page. One contains your content, the second contains your author information. And we wanted to create a 2-column layout where we have 1 column contains your author information, the rest of the content goes to your 2nd column inside your web page. Alrighty, let's take a look at our styles. So it's very simple. So wherever you wanted to move your okay, let's take a look at this one first and then we'll uncomment the other one. So I want my author info to be on the left of my page. Okay, so I'm going to set my position is absolute. Now I can move this particular author div. So from the top I want this to be positioned at 100 pixel and I want the width of that particular author info to take 300 pixels in my document. Okay, position is absolute. If you remember our buttons, so when you set position absolute, what will happen? The button started appearing related to the body of your document, and from there you can set your top. When you set top 100 pixel, it will move a little down. Okay, and then you have your width. Width basically takes the amount of width that is required for that particular div. Here I am setting the background color, so it would be very easy to see. For example, if you don't have your background color when you are breaking your columns, so let's take a look at how it looks right now. You see, this is how it looks. Okay, but when you set your background color to red, you can actually see that pretty well. So now this is where it is occurring right now. Okay, now what I need to do, so this is kind of like on top of your content. Now I need to move the content right side. So that what I'm going to do is, I know the width of this particular section, it's 300 pixel. If I leave a margin left of 300 pixel for this content, so then your content will move on the right. So that's how you do it. You basically use your margin left. So that's your two columns. You have your one column and you have your second column. Okay, now let's adjust this header also a little bit. Page.htm. Here I'm going to remove this. Here my header is a part of the content, so I'm going to comment out it as being a part of the content. I'm going to create a separate div for my header. Here I already have it. I'm going to just remove that. I'm going to just save it. I think that should take care of it. So if you see, I moved that header from here to here. So that's how your two column layout actually looks. So understood how we can set a two column layout using your positioning properties. Okay, now let's take a look at how we can do the two column layout using your float properties. In your float, you basically have float left, float right. These are the two common ones that we use. So if you remember, inside our page.htm that we have seen earlier, the other info was towards the bottom. But when you are using your floats, so you basically have to define it on the top, because your other info, it basically has to follow the flow of the document. So your other info has to come first when you are floating elements. Okay, so this is your other info. So that's, I already have the header and I have my content div. So I have three divs: header, other info, and my content. Okay, in your HTML file you don't use like this. You basically use your main tag for your content, your header, and your side element to define the side of your page. There's more of contextual elements in HTML5. For now, this is good enough to understand the floating properties. So let's go to our styles. So let's float this other info. Okay, I'm going to set float equal to left. So that means I want the element to be floated onto the left of the page. I want it to take a width of 200 pixel. That's what float left is. So it will stay on the left of your page. Okay, and the same way you basically set your content also to be floated to the left. I want the width to be 400 pixel and background color is yellow, so that we can see it actually. Let's close this one right there. Your page.html. Okay, so that's how it looks with your float. So we have floated the other to the left, and we have floated the content also to the left, and we have set the width of the content. So here what you can do is, so if you So setting the width of the content is very important. So let's say if you set your width to a little bit more, or if you even remove the width, for example. Okay, if you see that it's no longer a 2-column layout because it does not have enough space to fit in here as your second column. So that's why it's floating towards the bottom. So that's why we need to set the width so that both the columns have enough width to settle down. Okay, so width is 400 pixel and your 200 pixel. That's how you do your float. Float left, and you can also have float right if you wanted to float the column to the right if you want. You can also do that. Okay, that's your floating. One problem with your floating is when you if you create your column layouts, if you kind of like reduce the window size, it goes down because it does not have enough space. But if you do that with your positioning, it doesn't do that. Okay, that's the difference between your setting your column layouts using your positioning and your float. So when you use your float, if you reduce the window size, because it does not have enough space, it goes down to settles down to the bottom. Whereas your positioning, it doesn't do that. So that's why we use positioning most of the time, because we don't want our content to go to the bottom. So that's your 2-column layout with your float and your positioning. Let's take a look at an example for a 3-column layout. 3-column layout. In your 3-column layout, since we need to have 3 columns, so what I did was I created some links. You see, I have my div id equal to links is 1 column which goes to the left, and your content is the 2nd column that I want, and your other info is the 3rd column that I want. 3 columns that I want for my page. So how do you set it? You set your links to have a position absolute, and then you set your top, and if you set your top and if you set the width of that particular links, it will start appearing on your left hand side of your page. And then you set your based upon whatever the width that you have for your links, you set your margin left for your other info so that it moves, not other info, your content. So it moves. Okay, it leaves a little space for your links to settle down, and then your content will follow. The same thing for your other info. You set it to position absolute, and you set your top, and you set margin left. You give a bigger margin left. The left value should be a combination of the width of your links and the content. Okay, so that's how your 3 columns basically settles down on your page. Okay, for your links, here it is. Position is absolute, top is 100 pixel, width is 50 pixel, and background color is right. So let's adjust one after the other, so we can see how this actually looks. Okay, I got that wrong. Yeah, position is absolute. So let's run our HTML page to see how it actually looks. We see your links now arranged on the top, but if you see your content is also there behind your links. Now let's change that as well. Go to your styles page, CSS file. Let's set the content now. If you see your content styles, position is absolute. Top, from the top I want 100 pixel so that I have enough space for my header. I want the width of this to be 500 pixel, and from the left I'm going to leave out 50 pixel. You can use your margin left or left, it's fine. Because I left 50 pixel because my width of your links is 50 pixel. But if you want a little space in between them, you would probably leave a little more, like 60 pixels, so that you can see a little white line between them. Okay, I'm setting my background color to green so that I can see that on my page. Okay, now if you see your links mode, right? Now your links and your content content is arranged as your second column, but we have your third column still behind these guys. Now we need to adjust that as well. So let's go ahead. Let's remove all of these. So it's good to go. Your other info, margin left is 550 pixel. It's a combination of 500 pixel plus 50 pixel. So it's 550 pixels. Okay, you combine them and then you leave 550 pixel to your left margin of your other info, and you set the width of your other info. That's your 200 pixel. Now if you see your three columns, that they are there. Okay, so that's how you basically define your three column layouts for your websites using your positioning attributes. So let me talk a little bit about
far away from me, please. It's looking fine. We'll save this. We'll talk about the clear property later. So I need to do a little bit of reading on it, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. So I think this, so all